All right. And with no further ado, we are going to pass it to Ed to lead us in this moderated conversation. Ed, take it away.
Thank you, Sean. I'd like to join everybody in welcoming you all back. And I see some new names and faces. So especially for you folks who are joining us for Chapter 2, a very special welcome. I'm Ed Poliandro. I am a member of the ODI team. And I am absolutely both delighted and honored to have been invited to act as your facilitator to serve this conversation and you all in creating a space where we can really talk to each other and talk honestly and openly and listen to each other and all of us to grow together. So that's my goal and what I consider my role. So as we said before, we're going to be talking a little bit about key concepts of the chapter that Mary Frances and her team put together, a chapter overview. And then we're going to dive into the questions. And of course, that we will ask your feedback. So let's go and define justice again. And for those of you who were there last time, we're picking that up and she added something else. So justice requires us to repair harm and develop new ways of thinking and being that ask the questions, who will benefit from this decision and who will be harmed by this decision? And so how we are living as racial justice advocates in our workplace, in our system, is to see how we can repair harm and to ask questions. And then racial justice requires us to give grace and space for learning while holding people accountable for racist words and actions. And as I review this and think about this in my own experience in life and think about working all together with us all together, it's a very big task to give grace and space, to have patience, to understand, to use compassion, and yet to hold people accountable, and not only people accountable, but structures and structures within our own healthcare system. So she gives us some very important challenges to consider of how we're going to do this. Next, Bill. So some of the key concepts: minimization, to diminish the importance of something through words or actions. Weaponization, to intentionally spread lies and disinformation. And demonization, to betray something or someone as bad or evil. I know we are all unfortunately, very aware of all three in our world right now, in our country right now, in healthcare right now. And we're going to jump in and understand how they play out and then begin to think about, as a community, what we do and what our response is. So she begins with white supremacy culture, a way of understanding how systemic racism is ingrained in many of the systems we take for granted and may not be conscious of as the best and only way. So I invite us all to think about how that might play out in the workplace, in healthcare as an industry, the healthcare system in the United States. How does this get played out? And again, underlying, we take for granted and may not even be conscious. So I have to ask your patience because we have a lot on this slide. And like Sean, I don't like to read everything, but I'm going to be the guy that's got to read. But think about what words, as we go through this, what words are striking to you, what phrases, of course, from our own lived experience. And we chose to give give a lot of words here because this is what we would like to give the PowerPoint to you to think about after today, to share with your teams perhaps, to have conversations, because that's being an activist, that's doing racial justice at work. So these concepts, many of the racial concepts, as she says, are minimized, weaponized, and um, demonized. For example, minimizing and denying the existence of systemic racism, the weaponization and demonization of critical race theory, and of course, of white supremacy culture. And the rethinking the current use of the terms in the conversation with white supremacy culture. And she offers some very interesting terms of white supremacy culture. Now it can also be referred to as white normative culture or the dominant culture. And as we all know, words change their meanings within the context of a history or a historical moment or a generation or something that happens. So it's a constant, there's a fluidity to words and concepts. And so she brings out how important it is to hold on to these words and to see their movement, and then to decide how we want to stay in conversation or create these conversations. White supremacy culture is confused with white supremacists, and they are people who subscribe to a belief system that white people are the superior race and therefore should dominate to the exclusion or elimination of other races. White supremacy culture operates on the assumption that white people with their beliefs, ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions are superior to Black, Indigenous, people of color, and their ideas, thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And this typically plays out unconsciously as the unquestioned, completely accepted norms, behaviors, beliefs, values, and symbols are passed down by communication and imitation from one generation to the next. Again, she makes a point that much of this is unconscious and unquestioned. So therefore, there's an effort for all of us and an invitation to make the unconscious conscious and begin to ask questions. So some characteristics of white supremacy culture: the bigger is better, and manifested in unquestioned capitalism. Again, things that go unquestioned, even in our major economic system that we all participate in. When it goes awry and unquestioned, what happens and who's left out? And often leads to decisions that prioritize profit over people. And another characteristic is the right to comfort. And Mary Frances offers the notion that white people should not be made to feel uncomfortable is a premise guiding laws to retract or reject diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice efforts in many states. And we all know that in just being aware of the news and what's happening, and all the more the urgency to really talk to each other and come together as a community to figure out how will we respond to this. And now, is it acceptable that Black, Indigenous, and people of color would be uncomfortable in work environments that are unwelcoming and exclusionary? And just that question raises that if everyone is concerned about not wanting to make people feel uncomfortable, especially white people, in education and healthcare and whatever field, what about everyone else? What about BIPOC people who know what it is to be uncomfortable in a work environment that's unwelcoming and exclusionary? Critical race theory, just to give us to review a bit, is Kimberly Crenshaw, is a Black woman scholar and an attorney. She's an executive director, and she's credited with the coining the term as a way to study the enduring racial inequities in this country and ask the question, why? And it's very clear, Mary Frances wanted to make it very clear, this does not teach that all people are racists. That's part of the disinformation. It seeks to understand why racial disparities continue to persist, and most people don't know what it is, and yet, as she said, many people are against it. And CRT seeks to understand why racial disparities continue to persist, exist, and persist. And so this is perfect for us as healthcare professionals because it happens all over the place. We are all about looking at moving from health disparity to health equity. And then there's the great replacement theory, the idea that non-white immigrants will replace the white majority, gaining the political power to win, quote unquote, the culture war, and thus dismantling white supremacy. When in actuality, it's been BIPOC people who have been displaced. In the examples that we offer, we see the Indian Removal Act for Indigenous people in 1830, that's the Trail of Tears, the displacement of Chinese people in the 1870s, and the Japanese internment camps in World War II. So racial justice requires us to seek the truth. The truth about this great replacement theory is that there is no organized attempt to replace any dominant group. And many white people are uncomfortable discussing race. The fear of being wrong as a consequence and as a consequence punished. And of course, that frame of reference, this exacerbates the discomfort in exploring racial justice concepts and often creates a reluctance or a barrier to have conversations with all of us together that we can learn and we can hear each other's experience. So we're going to move on to our questions.